Hello everyone, welcome to CISA This Much. This is Aditya. Welcome back to CISA Midnight Series, and today we will look at the topic of overlapping controls versus dual control, and also we will look at a very good question on the topic of collusion from domain number 3. So three topics we'll be discussing, and this collusion topic is interlinked to the dual control, and I will help you understand how these two are interlinked, because the initial two topics, overlapping control and dual control, we don't have as a separate topic, but it is discussed in the form of a Q&A in the official QA. And also the collusion topic is also discussed in domain number 3 of the official QA. So we will discuss the question, and also we will understand this concept. All right, so let's understand what exactly do we mean by overlapping control and defense in depth. So what is overlapping control? Multiple independent controls addressing the same risk. So very important, multiple independent controls. So the controls are independent, okay? The controls are different, but multiple controls are addressing the same risk, same objective. Before we discuss the practical example, let's try to discuss a basic example. So you guys all are studying for the CISA exam. So what is, the primary preparation is always the official books, official materials of the ISACA, which is the CISA review manual and the CISA official QA, right? So even after investing in those materials, still you watch these lectures, still you go for subscription of our packages, right? So why are you doing that? You're doing that because that serves as an overlapping control, that serves as a defense in depth. Okay, so objective, okay, what is my objective and what is the official book's objective? So the objective is the same, that we want you all to pass CISA exam in the first attempt. So that's the objective. So our objective and their objective, the objective remains the same, but both are independent, right? And we also try to match our materials with their materials, right? In terms of meeting the objective, in terms of mitigating the risk, both serve the same purpose, right? So this is in simple terms overlapping controls. All right, so let's read the other stuff. This is intentional redundancy for assurance. Intentional redundancy, intentional duplication. Again, it's not fully duplication. We will look at the example, but it creates more and more assurance. Okay. And it is called as part of defense in depth. Very important term, defense in depth. What does it mean? If one layer fails, there are other layers in place to stop the threat. Okay, again, let's link into the with a simple example of your CISA preparation. So in case if you're not able to understand the official CISA review manual or the official QAE, we are there to protect you. Okay, so if one layer fails, we are there to protect you. Our materials are there to help you understand, and not just understand, help you to clear your CISA exam. So this is again a part of what? Defense in depth. Okay, again, just for your knowledge, I won't go much in depth into this stuff, but just for your knowledge, from the perspective of the auditors normally love defense in depth because it creates more and more assurance. Just think about it, the more controls we have, even if it is addressing the same risk, but more and more controls, it creates more and more assurance. As simple as that. But for auditees, it may not be always, they may not always appreciate it because it involves more and more budgets, more and more cost. Okay, sometimes it can also hamper in their performance. Okay, so if more and more controls are there, the employees, the auditees will have to go through all of them, and it can create performance impact. Again, not going much into that. I'm just trying to, again, this is just for knowledge, not relevant for solving the Q&A, but just to let you know that auditors will normally love, but auditees may or may not love it because for them they're involving more and more cost, right? So it is like a cost center for them. Okay, now let's look at practical example. So let's say the risk is malware infection. The risk is what? Malware infection. Okay, now you have endpoint antivirus, we have network firewall, we have email filtering. Again, you will understand these terms only if you have watched domain number 5 or if you have learned domain number 5. That's why I always say that here in the CISA exam, all the 5 domains are interlinked. Okay, you cannot, these questions, overlapping controls, dual controls, we have in domain number 1. Question on the collusion topic, it is in domain number 3, but the examples which I'm discussing, it is from domain number 5. So again, you have to understand domain number 5, then only you can watch this video. But anyways, let's try to keep it very simple. So endpoint antivirus or network firewall or email filtering or EDR monitoring, so again, all serves a different purpose. They have different objectives. But if we take only, if the risk factor, if we take only specific to malware infection, to some extent, every control try to prevent malware infection. So let's say if antivirus fails, okay, let's say it's a 0-day attack and antivirus is not able to recognize it based on its signatures. So what will happen is that we will have other controls. We have network firewall, we have email filtering, which will filter out your spam emails, or it will scan for those attachments. In case even if email filtering and everything fails, then also we have EDR monitoring, which will analyze the behavior, abnormal behavior in the endpoints, and it will give us the result that there's something abnormal is there. So every control, to some extent try to achieve what, to try to deal with this risk, which is the malware infection, right? So this is the example of overlapping controls. Okay, again, they are not wasteful duplication, they are layered protection. And again, all the when I say anti-malware or firewall, email filtering, EDR, they all serve different purpose. But from the objective of this, like the risk of malware infection, yes, to some extent everything tries to protect it, right? So that is why you will see that it is very difficult to hack big MNCs and big corporates, because they don't rely on single control. They have defense in-depth approach. They have multiple layers of control. So even if one control tomorrow fails, they have different controls in existence, which will help them to prevent attacks from happening. So it is very difficult. And also understand, from the auditees perspective, it is not just budgets like investment in these technologies or in these tools, but also they will require additional human resources to manage it. So in big companies you see different departments. For threat management and incident response, there's a different department. For security defense, there's a different department. You find different departments, right? So again, that involves a lot of cost, right? So from auditees, from the business perspective, it is a cost thing. It is a cost center, right? But again, we do have a lot of frameworks and all those requirements, which have these requirements of compliance. Again, I'm not going into that stuff because that is not required for your understanding and for solving the Q&A. So let's just stick to what is required and just try to keep things simple, right? So again, I have mentioned this example. So let's say if you have antivirus and a new zero-day malware arrives, so the, to some extent, email filtering will block the delivery, firewall will block the communication, EDR watches the behavior, right? So no single control is perfect. Overlapping controls ensure that the failure of one layer does not result in a successful attack. This is essence of defense in depth. Each control compensates for the weakness of the others. Each control compensates for the weakness of the others, right? All right. Now, next thing is dual control. We have just discussed overlapping control. Now here it is dual control. What is dual control? Dual control in simple terms is two people, one task. A transaction or an activity cannot be completed unless two authorized individuals participate. And this is a critical segregation of duties control enforced at the system level. Before we deep dive into this topic, just watch this video clip.
You will have complete privacy.
मुझे नहीं लगता।
What? Why, sir? What do you mean?
आपके पास भी चाबी है, अब आपने उससे खोला तो?
सर, जब तक आपका चाबी नहीं लगेगा, तब तक हमारा चाबी कुछ नहीं कर सकता। All right. Let me give you a demo to clear your doubts. Customer is the king. See this.
ये ऊपर का खोल।
Okay.
नहीं, नीचे का खोल।
All right, sir.
नहीं, सामने का खोल, वो।
As you wish, sir. No problem. ये देखिए, ये मैंने अपना चाबी लगाया। अब आप अपना चाबी लगाइए और खोलने की कोशिश कीजिए। सर, मैं कह रहा हूं कि नहीं खुलेगा, क्योंकि ये जो चाबी है वो लॉकर नंबर।
All right, so I hope that you have watched this clip from this movie. And again, here this is an example of dual control where both of them will have to put their keys for the lockers to get open, right? So it's a part of dual control. We see in these financial institutions and banks, we see these kind of controls, right? Again, let's look at one of the popular question. Okay, so in the official QA, you have 2 or 3 questions, same question, similar question on the same topic, again and again repeated from the dual control. Favorite question, which is, which of the following is the best method to prevent wire transfer fraud by the bank employees? To prevent wire transfer fraud. What is wire transfer? Electronic transfer of funds from one bank to another bank. In India we say NEFT, RTGS, IMPS, all those things, right? So in global, we call it as a wire transfer term. So wire transfer is nothing but electronic transfer of funds from one bank to another bank. Okay. Now banking employees. Okay, so they are doing it. So what is the best method to prevent this from happening is maker checker concept, which is having dual control. So one employee will initiate the transaction, the other employee will approve the transaction. Unless and until the approval happens, the transaction will not take place. Okay, so we are trying to prevent fraud from happening. So let's say if there is no dual control, and if I am the person who is initiating the transaction, I am the employee, I am the bank employee who is also approving my own transaction. So what will happen is that, do you think can fraud happen here easily? Yes, because let's say tomorrow I can transfer the funds to my own account, to any other my friends or relatives or colleagues account or whoever, so I can do that very easily. But since we have segregation of duties, I can just initiate, but then there is one other person as a segregation of duty that person will have to approve. Then only this transaction will get completed. So it is an example of dual control, and it's a very popular question. We have seen multiple times in the official books, official materials, and it's a favorite question. Okay. Option is independent reconciliation. Independent reconciliation, it's a detective control. We are talking about dual control, preventive control. And always understand one thing, preventive control is always the best control, you know. If preventive is not that, then we go for detective. But again, as I mentioned, we go for multiple controls to address the same risk. You know, it's a part of defense in depth. But anyways, independent reconciliation will not come. Rekeying of the wire dollar amounts. It is like input controls. You are you are rekeying the same amount so that there is no error in the amount. So if it is $1,000, it should not become $10,000. So it is rekeying. That's a part of input control. Two-factor authentication. That's a part of access control. That's a part of access control. But here we are discussing something else. Here the correct option is system enforced dual control, which requires two independent individuals to authorize. That is it. So again. One common misconception, which is what is not dual. Now you understood what is dual control. Now what is not dual control? Maker enters the payment, initiate the payment. One employee initiates and enters the wire transfer into the system. System executes immediately. System executes immediately. The payment is processed and executed before any review occurs. So immediately system executes. Now checker reviews later. A second person reviews the transaction only after the execution. Now that is not dual control. Why? Because it is a detective supervisory review control. The approval is happening after execution. If it is before execution, it is a part of dual control. But if the system executes it immediately and after you are reviewing that, it is not dual control. Okay, so keep this also in your mind, because here there is no prevention of fraud. True dual control requires a second authorization before the transaction is completed. Now, before I move on to the next topic, which is the collusion. Now here, one thing should come in your mind. What if the another person who is approving the transaction in the bank, he is my friend? Or what if I try to have an agreement with him, illegal agreement, that let's try to distribute the amount equally, and I will initiate a transaction, you approve the transaction, and let's generate some profits. Let's try to bypass the controls. What will happen? So that is nothing but collusion, and it is a part of your domain 3 question. They have one question on the topic of collusion. As such, they don't have a separate topic for this, but then they have asked in this question, very good question, which of the following is the greatest risk to the effectiveness of application system controls? Greatest risk to the effectiveness of the application system controls. The answer is collusion between employees. And trust me, it is a very big risk, because we have seen several cases in the past also, like if you search for the practical examples, where collusion happens, because understand one thing, we might have so many system controls, but if two people come together and they have malicious intention, then all these controls go for a toss. Collusion is a very big risk. Collusion can bypass even the most robust system controls by having multiple authorized individuals cooperate to circumvent them. Right? So I have been my duty is to initiate, the other person is approving. Again, in the banks we have other controls also. Okay, so it is not that easy to bypass this. But understand one thing, whenever we have these applications system controls, most of the times the biggest risk is the human factor. Because what if you have so many controls, you have so many system controls, but if I have to do something, I can't do anything, right? I have to do something, I can't do anything. And if there is a collusion happening between multiple colleagues, employees, it is a big risk. It is a big risk, right? So collusion between employees is the greatest risk because it involves two or more authorized individuals working together to defeat controls, including dual control, including segregation of duties, including system enforced safeguards. No technical control alone can fully prevent deliberate cooperation, intentional deliberate cooperation to commit fraud. Right? That's why we also say that if the senior management, if their intention is fraudulent, if they are running the company business of fraudulent purpose, all this technical stuff is of no relevance, because the senior management, we have discussed it in domain number 2. Again, it's not fully linked with this topic, but just trying to give you the overview. That if their intention is to do fraud by doing these businesses, IT controls, everything goes for a toss. As simple as that. Why collusion is so dangerous? Bypasses segregation of duties. Two people who should check each other instead cooperate. defeats dual control. Both authorized parties act in bad faith, undermines audit trails, difficult to detect without independent monitoring or whistleblower mechanism. If there is no whistleblower, who is whistleblower? Who will report? There will be one person in the company who will report, okay, something fraud happening between these departments. If there is no whistleblower, very difficult, right? Again, we have other stuffs, again, it's not relevant from from exam perspective, but then you can just read this once, mitigating collusion risk. All right, so with this we end this topic here, and I hope that you have understood and also understood how different topics are interlinked. Like overlapping dual control is there in the official QA domain number 1, collusion is there in domain number 3, question answers, and but how these topics are interlinked, right? I hope everybody have understood. Thank you very much.